Hello and welcome to part 4 of our discussion series, Gracefully Embracing Chaos, brought to you by McKinsey Corporation. I'm here with Jenny and Katie, co-owners of McKinsey Corporation. Yesterday we talked a little bit about brand authenticity, and within that discussion came up internal brand culture. So that's what I wanted our topic for today to be, brand culture development. I think it's easy, again, for brand culture to become a buzzword, and whenever buzzwords happen, they start to lose their meaning and value and start kind of to take on an ambiguous definition. So I'm interested in knowing what, Jenny, is your definition of brand culture?
Wow, I feel like it's a big topic to be able to talk about. Brand culture to me is, I think it's the essence of who you are, how you operate, kind of the rules of the road about what happens within a company. I know it's hard to say this is a brand culture and just kind of, we've got our rules of the road. And I think Kate mentioned the other day, if we just put them on the walls or send out an email, that is not necessarily, to me, brand culture. Brand culture is what happens between employees. It's between employees and customers. It's the interaction that happens. Maybe when the boss is not looking or when people aren't looking, it's kind of this is the way we do things here. This is the way it's done here. That just starts to become the fabric behind the way a company operates, is how I long-winded kind of explaining brand culture to me. Kate?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think it's, you sometimes think about like the Googles or these super cool organizations, kind of the techie Silicon Valley that then has so much cool stuff, the exercise classes and the ping pong tables and all these different things. And I think it's easy to say that's like such a cool culture there, but it really is actually starting to say, why are they doing that? So ping pong tables can actually help facilitate kind of what you used to maybe be the water cooler conversations, or opportunities for collaboration and conversation to be able to be had while you're doing something, fun and active, which gets the mind thinking in a different way. So I think it's kind of neat if you actually peel back what some of these opportunities are, that you see what people say, gosh, they have such a cool culture there, and really trying to figure out what it is that the organization is really trying to foster. And I think, like Jenny said, I would say it's kind of like the ethos of who the organization is. And again, it's the who are we when no one's looking? How do we hold each other and our team members accountable for different types of things? And that everybody's moving towards the same vision and mission at the same way. So, yeah.
I think definitely a big thing there, sorry, Brent, real quick, is the difference between a tactic, and we might get into this, but it's not sort of the ping pong tables and the free lunches is not the culture. It's the underlying piece there. Because one of those things can come and go, but it's an underlying, what's put beneath and the why behind it. Yeah.
So McKinsey is a second generation family business. And I came in around 2013, shortly after you started to take the reins from your dad, who started the company back in 1985. There was still a good number, and still are, of legacy employees who have been there for 20 years. What have been some of the most fun parts of establishing your own company culture, and what have been some of the most challenging parts of establishing your own company culture? Katie?
Yeah, that one's, there's a lot again in that question. So our dad he's 180-degree opposite of the two of us. And Jenny and I are very different, but we have really the same philosophy of what we're looking for. We really, truly believe in that whole collaborative concept. Is if we can have, one meeting where we're bringing the whole team together and like everybody's hearing it at the exact same time. We can all ask clarifying questions at the same time. Everybody leaves with a very clear vision of where we're going. Our dad's philosophy was, which is just kind of funny. He would go from office to office and talk to each person individually, which allows for strengthening those individual relationships. So there's tremendous value in that. But let's say by the third office that he went to go talk about the same project with, they had a question, then he'd go work his way backwards and share that information back. So as individuals, they all had very, very good, strong relationships with our dad. We didn't always see then the cross relationships between the whole team functioning as a whole. they were all rowing in the same direction because he was a really amazing leader in that sense. But we truly, that's been, I think, one of the biggest fundamental shifts is switching more to this collaborative approach and having to explain that, again, a company culture of collaboration doesn't mean that we have to like do kumbaya and like all go to happy hour every day, because that's not fundamentally the types of personalities of the team members that we have. You know, we have many self-proclaimed data nerds, introverts, definitely not people who like want to be going out to lunch together all the time. If we tried to infuse that in, it just wouldn't make sense for the team that we have. So we had to really describe the word of collaboration in a way of them understanding that it actually doesn't mean that we all have to work together and talk nonstop all day long. It's just the fact that we're all hearing it for the same time together. So I think that's one small example that's been like the biggest shift. And it's, you know, it's just different. We also, you know, our company's been around 35 years. We're a little older than 35, but there's some employees, our longest term employee had retired after 31 years last February. And, you know, so we met her when we were 9. So that's, you know, it's really interesting when you're like, and now we're going to be in charge and change the way that we're going to do things fundamentally. And that's, you know, it's just interesting. I mean, that's the pluses and minuses and the joys of a family business, that when you've been and had team members, and we've been so blessed to have team members that we've had for a long time, and we acknowledge that they didn't ask for the change and that they are participants in the party, but they didn't specifically ask for something to be totally different in their worlds.
Yeah, I think the question was what's different. I think, though, there's a lot of the same, that this spirit of entrepreneurship, excuse me, that it's interesting when we've been a family business, or we've been around for 35 years, but Mackenzie really started with Dad chatting with an old colleague on the beach in Laguna Beach, ran into him, and he was mentioning a business problem that he had, and he said, oh, well, I can solve that problem, and I can solve that problem, and I can solve that problem. That was kind of how that was how Mackenzie started, in innovating and growing. Our space, the data space and customer insight space, has changed tremendously over 35 years, the amount of information, the amount of data. But I think that if we continue to come back to even the core of what we started with, of innovation, curiosity, problem solving, that is who Mackenzie is at its core. We might just be doing it in a different way, in a different phase. So that's why I do like kind of making sure that we're looking underneath the surface. We are continuing to be problem solvers, innovators, collaborators, but in a different way than we were before. So it's a fun space to be in. And as we grow and introduce new team members in, new partners into our the fold, it is important to remind people of the underlying culture. And that's not again, just saying it, it's actually doing it and living, breathing, whatnot. Yeah.
So I know you both, and I've seen it firsthand, have put a lot of time and energy and effort into conveying to the team what your vision for the culture is, and then applying and employing different approaches to try to get people to engage and understand and make sure that everybody's on board with it. What are some of the most effective strategies or methods you've found to working with such a diverse, eclectic team in getting them to hop on board, or at least to understand and agree with the culture that you guys are developing?
I mean, I could start with at least, and then, I mean, this is Kate's kind of realm and bread and butter that she has, but when we worked with our transition consultant, Joanne Norton, a while ago, she talked a lot about communicate again. So it's not a surprise. And this is not a one-time thing. You know, I think sometimes companies will send out notice and say, these are our new rules of the road, or this is our value prop, or this is whatnot. And it's all about kind of external in the brand book to get the word outside. We infuse the culture and the conversation all the time. I mean, even pre-pandemic, while we were all at the office, we were doing Monday and Friday team huddles, 9 a.m. Mondays and Fridays. We always come together, talk about what's going on for the week, individually what's happening. That has continued throughout the pandemic, that we are now virtually doing our team huddles. We're talking about the values, we're collaborating on projects. So I just think it's doing, reminding, talking about all the time. and living and breathing the culture is what my biggest takeaway.
Yeah, and I think you kind of mentioned on this, how we try different things, right? I mean, not every idea that we have on how to help try to bring some of these ideas in the culture to life is going to stick. And I think for me over time and just the acceptance of realizing that just because maybe one thing doesn't stick, that wasn't a failure, it actually was a step forward, because it was to say, like, maybe for one person it did resonate a little bit. I mean, we've done everything from like the strength finders and what are my motivators and those types of things, which I do think some of our, it's a different philosophy than maybe everybody's interested in, but there are little nuggets that we start to realize and learn a little bit more about each other just in that sense. And that's not so much the culture, but for me, it's really important that we understand each other as individuals and people, because then if we really truly respect each of our team members, it helps us be able to want to make sure that we're not only setting ourselves up for success, but we're always wanting to be able to set our team members up for success too. So trying different things like that. We came up with the Mactive Scholarship that some people took advantage of and some people didn't, but we just are so, Jenny and I are so passionate about wanting to be able to work with brands to create remarkable experiences. And we wanted to give our team members opportunities to be able to go try or do something that they probably wouldn't spend maybe their own money on. So it could be going on a trip. It could be, I think you tried the sensory deprivation chamber. It had to be in Orange County just because we're so passionate about Orange County, but getting out and experiencing things and then coming back and sharing. And the range of ideas that people came up with was just also another really cool way to get to know our team members and living and breathing what we truly are passionate about, which is, remarkable experiences out in the community. So, I mean, I could talk for the next 12 hours about different things we've tried, and some that have worked and some that haven't. But, again, it's just continuing to say what ticks for each team member and what can we do to be able to give different resources where needed is our biggest thing.
And I think this goes back to our discussion in part 3 about authenticity, is that if you two have an idea for culture and you're sitting and waiting for positive feedback from the team, for someone to come and open the door and say, wow, this is so great, I loved that, that's not always going to happen. But that doesn't mean that it didn't make a positive impact. That didn't mean that they don't think or feel that. You had discussed the rules of the road that we have, which are basically the expectations that the brand, our company has for itself and our team, and consistently across the board, things like show up on time, be ready to go. And you talked about then the Monday and Friday huddles. And for I think it was like a month or two, a different team member to kick off each meeting read the rules of the road aloud. And I think I can only imagine that if you're implementing that approach, if you guys suggest that, to think, oh, are people going to think it's boring, or do they think this isn't really worth it? But the reality is, each person, each time they're listening to it, they're going to hear something different, be it because of whatever experiences they had that week, or because they are paying attention to one sentence more than the other. And I mean, in all, full disclosure, you're not hanging on every word when people are saying this each and every time, but you do catch something different. And so having done that for a few weeks, people aren't going to be coming into your office and saying, wow, I had this interesting realization. I mean, maybe they do. I don't think I did, but maybe people do. But you are, it's still working. It's still making an impact, even if you don't see it. And that's then where that authenticity comes in, is that we believe in this. We're doing it because we think it's important, and we're going to stick by it. And that consistency and dedication to the vision is such a huge part of developing that culture. And it comes through a lot for us. And so I commend you both for putting forth those efforts, because it's not easy. And you guys have been doing a great job of that.
Thank you. One note real quick on that, Brent, is I think you made a really good distinction there of, I don't think we're necessarily looking for, I mean, it would be great, I guess, but I'm not looking for someone to come in and say, hey, I had this great, realization because of this. What actually makes me more happy, I think makes us both more happy, is watching then collaboration happening, or watching the impact of that happening. So not necessarily somebody coming in and saying, hey, I really resonated with this. It's actually seeing it in action. Like that, like the impact of it happening is fantastic. And that we're seeing across the board. We're seeing team members connecting more. We're seeing people do things differently. We're seeing the rules of the road in action. That to us is really, really exciting. And I will say, for anybody that's looking to implement different ways infusing their culture of trying different things. If you stop and worry about is every single person, what are they going to think about this, or how's it going to land, or what's going to happen? I think this goes back to, I think it was when we were talking about authenticity, is you can control the intent by which you put something out. And if you're just consistent about what you're doing, and if it goes along to your brand purpose of why you're doing it, I think that that's what just in staying consistent with what you're doing in the long run. I mean, consistency. Yeah.
Yeah. And that consistency is such a big deal because, and I, speaking as a team member, is that when things continue to happen, when you introduce something new, we know it's going to stick. We know that you guys are bringing this up because you've thought about it. It's part of a big vision, and that this isn't going to be a one-time thing, because I've seen the other things that you introduce are consistent and they stick around and there's purpose behind it. So when something new comes up, you guys have established that credibility for yourselves that, oh, this isn't just another one of their ideas, is that this is something meaningful and I should pay attention because it's going to be around for a while.
Yeah, there's one thing too, and I know we're kind of now, sorry, we're hijacking the moderator.
No, that's good.
One thing that I think is interesting, even in you talking about this, and I think it's just based on the time that we're at, right? So we've now been in a remote situation, so our office still isn't fully open, a remote situation for 6 months. And so it's been really interesting of how we've had to say, hey, wait a second, some of this isn't in alignment with our rules of the road. So how are we adapting to the current situation and the current remote situation, and how we have to foster this collaboration and how we're leaning in to be able to make sure that we're having those different touch points, and how are we supporting each other, just to make sure that just because we're in this doesn't mean that we abandon those values and that culture that we work so hard to be able to get. So that's another one. And again, that's, as a leader, it is difficult. It's just one more thing to have to figure out, and one more thing to have to make sure that we're staying on, and that each team member is not, because when you're then working remote and working from home, it's easy to kind of get in your own individualized, and that's what we've worked 10 plus years to try to break down, that individualized thinking. And so it's just a really interesting challenge. And so I just more want to acknowledge that for other leaders who might be listening, that we hear you and we understand, but it's so worth the time to have to figure out how to bring your culture to life in this virtual and remote thing. And that's, again, coming back even to the authenticity thing and reaching out and asking for help. I've never led a fully remote team before. And so now it's starting to say, okay, what learnings can I take? Where can I learn more about how to effectively do things like that, right? And that's the opportunity for growth during this time as well. And so that's just more something I wanted to kind of put out there that I think is an interesting thing, because it's one thing to be able to talk about culture pre-COVID and pre this pandemic, and then how the culture, the effort and the energy has to be put down, almost like you have to double, triple down the efforts during this time, because we will get back to a sense where we're all back in the office, and we're going to have to shift and get used to that one all over again as well.
We recently went through a really fun and exciting brand refresh. So Mackenzie got kind of an injection of energy and life, and I wanted to know, kind of a two-part question: what inspired this initiative? And then what are some ways that you see a brand refresh can influence or strengthen a brand's culture? Let's start with Jenny.
Oh man, what prompted it? I think with our 35 years and going into, and I think, was it right in the middle of COVID that we were doing this, which is kind of crazy, because why not do that in the middle of all of this? It seems as though, and as I said, I mean, the core business and our core culture and what we're doing has remained consistent, but our business has evolved. I mean, we really have, of how we're serving our clients, how we're going to market, the industries that we're serving. We're expanding what we're doing. We're strategically looking at things a lot differently than we have. So I think doing a brand refresh is a unique time and position to be able to say, well, where do we want to be? How do we want to stand in the market? I mean, I think most businesses now today should be looking at their brand positioning. Does their products and services make sense in this market? And if so, does their marketing make sense? Who are you talking to? What's the messaging that you're putting out there? And we've got a really fun, fresh, new energy. And we're working on some really fun, exciting projects that we are excited to share and go out to market with. So I think it was also a really good opportunity for us to reevaluate. I mean, Kate and I spent hours going through our mission and our vision and really making sure, is this exactly where we want to be and what we want to stand for the next 35 years from now? So I thought it was just a really good, unique time that we had a minute to breathe. I mean, we wanted to do this for a little bit. I think during this time, there's a lot of things that business are like, well, I haven't had time. I haven't had time. We've been so busy. Katie and I 100% are using this time to strengthen the foundation of our business, to make sure who do we want to be when we come out of this. And we're more excited than ever. So it seemed like a fun time to do this project.
I think that brings up a good point, is that the brand refresh isn't just changing the logo or changing the colors. It's an entire undertaking that includes revisiting the purpose, the vision, the mission, and everything that's underneath. And that all then bubbles up to then be reflected in the logo and the colors, which can and do change. But it's just so much more than that. And I think that's often overlooked, is that someone says, we don't want to change our brand or our logo because X, Y, and Z. Yeah, but it's so much more, and you get so much more out of it than just that, as long as you do it right, and as long as you take that strategy and have that approach.
Take the time, yeah, all of that. It's a philosophy by which McKinsey is running now, of looking at innovative ways of doing things and challenging and assumptions and asking why and digging deeper. And I mean, it's taking what we're doing, but going deeper and going beyond. So I don't know, it's exciting. Kate, do you have?
Yeah, no, I think, we came originally, even where we were at, we probably did a brand like total rehaul when we first took over about 10 years ago. And that's then where we came up with the new colors and then came up with the original tagline of curious, creative, customer centric. And that really spoke, tremendous volumes to where we were, and that we really still believe in. But where we actually kind of tweak some things around is then being able to say, bringing passion and curiosity together to help brands create remarkable experiences. And really that's, again, it's that curiosity, but then that passion of really coming, and that's something that we just so feel it and believe it, that we wanted to be able to make sure that that was actually coming out as well. So again, they're minor tweaks, but they're things that, like, I love being able to talk about what we're passionate about, and like that comes out in conversation and comes out in dialogue now more than ever. And it had been leading up into that, and now that's where it was just, how do we bring that out, and how do we relook at certain words that we're using to describe what we're doing? And again, they're like minor tweaks, but they're being able to actually bring the energy that like we feel when we think about what we do at McKinsey, and we just get so excited about it, that we wanted to make sure that that was coming out then kind of like through everything that we're putting out there that represents our brand. So again, they're small tweaks, but they're things that we feel like really is just being able to encapsulate where we are today and the growth that we've made over the last 10 years.
So to wrap things up, I want to take a look back a little bit, and this is before your time with McKinsey. Is you both had jobs at different organizations and kind of honing your skills as professionals. Looking back on that pre-McKinsey work experience, what is something that you noticed from those employers from a cultural standpoint that you really liked, or that you look back on and it helps drive or guide some of your decisions today?
I can go. One of my first job out of college was at a corporate meeting and event industry or company, and it was huge. And there was employees who are still there, who probably had been there for now probably 20 or 30 years. So that longevity of originally that small crew who started and got to a couple hundred employees. And so I think that there was a lot to be said about that loyalty. But what I took away from that organization was actually I didn't feel very appreciated and valued as a team member. It was just kind of like pile on the work and just work you to the end. And then team changes happening, and then like the more of the energy of kind of like you should feel lucky still to be able to have a job, instead of saying we chose you to be here because of the things that you bring and the contributions that you do, and how can we help to make sure that you're still feeling not overworked and over overextended. So I think for me, one of the biggest things more was wanting that I took away from that is wanting to be able to create a culture where people always felt valued and appreciated, because no business is success is alone only at the leader or the person at the top. You know, it's the team that's there and all of us doing the hard work together. So for me, it was more of some things that I experienced that I didn't want to have a business that had the same types of culture. Would probably be one of my biggest things.
Yeah, I think most of my experience pre-McKinsey was at large corporations, so at Home Depot or HSBC Bank. And actually, we just kicked off yesterday. We've got 3 new interns from Fullerton starting with us. And I was talking to them and talk a lot about with college students is there is tremendous value, I think, in being in big businesses, big companies, and small companies. I mean, there's just such a difference there. So what I loved about being at big businesses was their structure, their mentorship programs, their leadership, the continual training of what you have. I mean, some of my best mentors I still have, still connect with from there. I was lucky that we had just some really, really great leaders there that could help you move up the organization and help us with our career path. So I think that mentorship has been huge for me, and continual learning. I think I got from the big companies that now I can apply here at McKinsey and for our team members. Yeah, it's an interesting question though. I haven't thought about those 2 places in a while.
Great. Well, thank you so much, both of you, Jenny and Katie, co-owners of McKinsey Corporation. This has been Gracefully Embracing Chaos, our discussion series. We're going to continue to cover a variety of topics. If you have ideas for a discussion topic or questions you want to hear, please leave a comment or reach out to us at www.mckinseycorp.com. We'll be back with more. Thank you so much for joining us.